program relates to the postgraduate program, the MA English program, and the final year of the MA English program, and it is based on this book, English in Use, the Abilities of Individuals. The program is specifically on block 4, which is about spoken communication, participation as listeners and speakers. To participate in this discussion, I have with me in the studios today Dr. R. Kishore Kumar, who is a reader in the Center for ESL Studies, School of English Language Education, CIEFL, Hyderabad, and Dr. Geeta Durerajan, reader and head, Center for Evaluation, School of English Language Education, CIEFL. Both of them have participated in the activities of the Open University. Dr. Kishore Kumar has been a counselor, writer of course materials, and has assisted us in the development of non-print materials as well. Dr. Geeta Durerajan is the author of these lessons which we shall be speaking about today. May I now request Dr. Kishore Kumar to begin the discussion by speaking about the differences between spoken and written texts.
Thank you, Professor Pushparam Krishna. As you know, language is a tool for communication, and we talk of 4 language skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And as you know, of these, listening and reading are receptive skills, and speaking and writing are productive skills. In reading and writing, we have a reader and a writer. The writer encodes the message and the reader decodes the message. And in speaking and listening, we have 2 participants. One is a speaker, the other one is a listener. Now, in this part of the program, we shall look at the differences between spoken text and written text. Now, as you know, written texts are texts where you can spend a lot of time on them. Written text is a planned activity. In other words, what we are trying to say is writing lends itself to this kind of thinking, planning. You can think, you can plan, and you can write. So it's a very planned activity. When you come to spoken text, spoken texts are spontaneous. You have to do that in real time. For example, if you ask me a question now, I have to answer it immediately. I can't say, please give me 2 minutes, let me think, let me organize my answer. So when I have to answer, I have to do it in real time, but at the same time I need to think. So I will be thinking on my feet, I will be answering your question at the same time, I will also be thinking about what I should say. Number 2, once you write something, you can always, when you are writing something, for example, if you are writing an essay, your focus is on the points, your focus is on the content, your focus is not on the language. So what do? Once you write the first draft, you go through it to find out if what you have written is grammatically correct. Okay? But this is not possible when it comes to spoken text. Once you say something, it's the end of it. That's all. You can't change it. The third point, it is possible for us to correct what we have written because we have rules of grammar. We have grammar rules which very clearly tell us how something should be written. We have dictionaries which will help us in finding out if we have written something correctly, but there are no such rules which are clearly described for spoken text. If you look at a spoken text, usually each sentence, the sentences are very short, and they are all connected mostly by coordinating conjunctions like and, but. Okay. So these are some of the differences between written text and spoken text, but at the same time there are some exceptions. For example, if you are writing an informal message, you are going out, there is no one at home, so you want to leave a message. Do you plan? Do you spend some time thinking what to write? You just write, going out, will be delayed, don't wait. So this is like your spoken text. You don't have full sentences, complete sentences. It's an informal message. Though it's a piece of writing, it's like a spoken text. Similarly, when you have to give a lecture or make a speech or make a presentation, though it is an oral presentation, your text, what you say, appears like a written text. So whenever you have to give a lecture, you have to make a speech, whenever you have to make a presentation, you go there planned. You spend a lot of time on what you want to say and how you want to say. So they look like a written text. So some texts, though they are written, look like spoken text, and some texts, though they are spoken, look like written text.
Could you now, Geeta, tell us more about the texts that are used and the context in which these texts come into play?
Okay, we've just been looking at differences between spoken and written texts. Let's now ask ourselves, what are the kinds of roles we take on when we speak, and who are the people we speak to, and do those roles also differ? And then ask, is there a connection between the kind of role we take on and the language we use? Now, this kind of speaking we do in both our mother tongue and in English. We keep changing our roles all the time. So the first question we have to ask ourselves in our minds before we begin speaking is, who am I when I speak? But that's not enough. You then have to ask, who am I speaking to? Am I speaking to a friend? Am I speaking to my college or school principal? Am I speaking to my father, my grandfather? Am I speaking to an acquaintance? And so on. And at the same time, also ask, what is the relationship between these two people? As I said, if it's a grandfather, a father, or a school principal, then we are saying this person is older and therefore you're superior. It may be a friend and therefore somebody who's an equal. And then it could be somebody who's younger than you, or it could be somebody who in status is inferior. Now, depending on this role relationship again, the choice of language that we use changes. It's also important to keep in mind, where am I speaking and when am I speaking and to whom? So there are about 4 ideas we have to keep in mind. 1, who am I when I speak? Whom am I speaking to? And when and where am I speaking? Last of all comes the most important point, which is, why am I speaking? Depending on the place and the reason, our choice of language will change. First of all, we might choose to speak in either Telugu or Hindi, or we might choose to speak in English. Now, if you're speaking in Telugu and Hindi and talking to your father, your mother, your grandfather or grandmother, you use honorific terms. You don't say nuvu, you say miru. And then everything else becomes easier. Now, in English, we don't have this choice. We therefore have to capture politeness in our language. Now, similarly, let's look at what will happen depending on the place in which you're speaking to someone. Think of your college or school principal. If you meet that principal in a shop, the way you talk to that person will be a little different from the way you will talk to that person inside his or her office. That too, therefore, is something we need to keep in mind. Now, let us look at one small example. We look at making requests. Okay, I'm going to show you a small example and then we will look at what the difference is. Let's take posting a letter. Now, if you wanted your friend or your brother or sister to post a letter, you'll simply say, post this letter for me. But if a lecturer were to ask a student, might say post the letter, or will state, will you post this letter for me? Now, if I wanted to ask Professor Pushpa Ramakrishna whether she can take my class, or Dr. Kishore Kumar, because he's my friend, I'll ask him, hey, can you take my class today? But supposing I wanted to ask a person who is a colleague, but somebody who is senior to me and also not my friend, I would have to be very, very careful about how I make that request. I may have to say, look, I have a small request. Would you be able to take my class tomorrow? Now look at the difference between the two. In one case we say, hey, can you take my class today? And in the other we say, I have a small request. Would you be able to take my class? The request is the same. The choice of language is different. Let's look at one more example. We're going to talk about asking for some money. You need to ask your friend to give you 10 rupees because you forgot to bring your lunch. What will you ask him or her? Hey, give me 10 rupees, da. Will that be acceptable? Or, if you want to be a little more polite, can you loan me some money? But supposing it's a lot more money and you're not sure whether the person will say yes or no, you will not say, give me 500 rupees. You will make it, I have a big favor to ask. If you don't mind, can you spare 500 rupees? Look, I promise to return it next month. Now let us take a look at this. What are we doing with this example? We're making the same request, but we're making it in different ways. Therefore, A, who am I when I speak? To whom am I speaking? Why am I speaking? And where and when will all determine the nature of language. Now, so far we've looked at unplanned speaking. Let's think about what happens when you can plan and speak. For let's say you've been told, you go to an interview and they tell you, plan and now speak for 2 minutes on a topic. We'll give you 5 minutes to think. Then it becomes closer to writing, closer to what Dr. Kishore Kumar spoke about when he spoke about writing. Then you can quickly put all your points down, order them, and start speaking. Let us now quickly move to looking at the other aspect of oral communication, which is listening. Again, let's ask, what do we do when we listen to somebody speaking? If we're listening in Telugu and in Hindi, we have no problem. Even if that person mumbles some words, makes some mistakes, we can understand because it's our language. But when it is a language like English that we are not familiar with, we think that we should listen to every single word. And then, because we are listening to every single word, we're listening to the and the but and the in and the and the on, we sometimes miss out on the important words. Now, how do we try and adjust this? As proficient speakers, we change and know what to do. But with English, we don't do this. Therefore, what is it that we can do to make us better listeners? When we are listening to somebody else, if we can quickly think about what is this person likely to tell me, then I know what to do. Okay, but are announcements the only kinds of listening we do? But no, there are 3 kinds of listening. One is the listening when we listen to announcements. Now this is one-way listening. No interaction, we listen, we get the information and we go away. Then a big public talk. Then you have a second type of listening, which is informal, interactive listening. Here, we are listening and speaking at the same time. These are dialogues, conversations, and group discussions. And then we have a third kind of listening, where it's like listening to a public speech. For example, when you go to a study center and somebody is giving you a lecture, you can listen, you can make notes, but you can interrupt sometimes or quickly make notes and ask questions. Now, the important question for you is, are there differences in the way we listen for these 3 kinds of listening, just as how there are some differences between planning, planned speech, and unplanned speech? Let's look at announcements. all our attention when we listen to announcements should be only on the information. We know what we want and we should learn to listen only for that. Let's take dialogues and group discussions. A small part of the context is known, but you don't know what the other person is going to tell you. It can be unpredictable. Therefore, we have to listen a lot more carefully actually, because at least with announcements, you know that what you have to listen for is time, platform, train number. With a group discussion, you don't have this choice. You have to listen to anything the other person says, and then what is worse, you can't tell them, I'll think and answer. A small part of your mind has to begin thinking about, now what should I say in response? Should I begin with will I, can I interrupt? What do I do? All of this has to happen. So we need to listen carefully. We also need to be prepared to speak. Last of all, let's look at lectures and talks. Now this is a little easier. When you go to class, you know what the teacher is going to talk about. You know the topic. Therefore, you only have to look for details and information. You can take down what the person has said. You can actually write down questions, think about what you want to say, rephrase your question properly, make it more like a planned bit of speaking, and then ask your questions. Now, if we were to write down what we speak and read it, I'm sure we'll think that we are making mistakes, but we are not making mistakes because we're thinking as we speak.
What you're saying in fact is that spoken communication can be like this, that the nature of the communication itself is such that it can evolve as you go along. You can actually add to it, you can modify it, you don't need to do it perfectly, especially if it's not a formal context.
Yeah, quite right. It cannot be completely pre-planned because we don't know what the other person is going to say. And depending on the ideas that the other person says, I have to take it from there and continue.
But sometimes if you're asked a question and you need to answer the question there and you don't have a ready answer for that question, now you have to play for time. So you need to use different strategies, like you can say, oh, you asked a very good question. I'm very glad you have done this. You have asked me this question. See, what are you doing? You are not trying, you're not appreciating the person for asking this question. What you're doing is you are getting some time for yourself to organize your answer in your mind.
So we are also saying that in spoken communication, sometimes many things are left unsaid.
Yeah, yes. Many things are left unsaid.
So it's also a question of understanding what is said perhaps by other communications, in the sense that you have body language, you have facial expressions, you have intonation. Could you talk about that, Geeta?
Supposing I say something like, what we hear is, the door is open. Now this door is open can mean at least 3 different things. It can mean, 1, somebody is sitting inside, they hear the doorbell, and from inside you hear a voice, the door is open. It means, look, the door is open, please come in. You walk into the door, into somebody's office, and this person says, and you want a confidential meeting, and the person whom you're going to meet says, door's open. Automatic indication is, close the door, not open it and come in. Even more interesting is 2 children in the middle of the afternoon. I'm sure this is said in Telugu half the time or in Hindi. 2 children will say, shh, door's open. Meaning, I wanted to go to the storeroom and take out something to eat, but the door is open. Let's not make noise, otherwise Amma will wake up and come and catch us. Now, what are we saying? First of all, that same door is open is said in many ways. Doors open, and it means different things. But this is not so much of a problem as how we use English and sometimes make lots of mistakes. Okay, let's take a simple, we spoke about requests earlier, asking for some money, asking for somebody to post a letter. Now let us say that I want somebody to buy me some bread. So what am I likely to say? To ask that person, please will you buy me a loaf of bread? This will sound terribly artificial. Okay? I may not even use the please, but if I said, buy me a loaf of bread, now that's worse. But I could say something like, buy me a loaf of bread, will you? Now what have I done there that I have not done with the, please will you buy me a loaf of bread? I have used intonation. Now we do this in our languages, koncham chestava. It's not as though we say chestava all the time, but we seem to not be able, or we forget to do this when we're talking in English. We learn that we must use would you. So, would you buy me a loaf of bread? And then we wonder why that person stares at us as though we are idiots who don't know the language. Or if you take the use of please itself, we think that using please is enough. That using thank you is enough, and we forget that it is stress and intonation that is much, much more important. Think about how your mother will ask you to go and buy some rice for you. Hey, 5 kilo chawal teeskara. But that is a mother to a child, to a young son, to a daughter, and you don't have to worry about, am I being polite? Mother doesn't have to think, will the child get angry with me? Even with your mother or father, you might be equally impolite. Impolite within quotation marks. But you can't do that when it is with friends, when it is with other people. We have to start thinking about what is the intonation we use. Are we at least conveying politeness through our voice, if not through language? Would you agree with that?
Yes, Kishore, what do you say?
Yeah, I certainly agree with you. It's very important that we use the right expressions. In a formal setting, we use formal expressions. But language itself is not enough. You also, as Geeta rightly said, your tone, the way you say it, voice, intonation, all these combined together to create the right impact. Because whenever you communicate with someone, you have a purpose in mind. You want the other person to do something. You may be using very polite expressions, but if your facial expression doesn't match with, or your body language doesn't match with the expressions, then you don't have the impact
and
which you intend to.
And it's probably true that body language is first understood,
Yeah.
and you don't listen to the words, you probably look at the person first.
Yeah.
So in spoken communication, body language has a greater role to play.
Yeah, especially in formal presentations, and most of our participants may have to take part in group discussions, may have to make presentations. If they apply for jobs in multinational companies, this is what they are required to do. And as you say, when they speak, they have to look into the eyes of the audience. It conveys the impression that you are interested in what you are saying. You are interested in the audience. You are interested in them. And before you participate in the group discussions, you have to prepare yourselves well. Now, in a discussion, what do you do? We agree with people, we disagree with people, sometimes we partially agree with people, sometimes we partially disagree with people. Sometimes we have to give our opinion, sometimes we have to ask for clarification, we have to ask them to repeat what they have said, we have to interrupt them when they are speaking. Sometimes when we are speaking, if someone interrupts us, we have to politely tell them that they should let us finish what we want to say. So, if we can learn these expressions, language of group discussion, language, you need to perform these functions.
Can I ask you a small question?
Yeah.
Now, is it okay for me to interrupt you like this in this discussion?
Yeah,
is this one of the ways of interrupting?
No, that's not the right way.
Then how would it be better done?
No, you have to do it in a polite way. If I could say something, may I say something? If I may be allowed to say something. If I may interrupt, you have to preface it. You cannot, just start saying what you want to say. You have to seek their permission first.
I think it will also depend upon the kind of discussion it is. For
Yeah.
instance, if it's a panel discussion, if
Yeah.
it's a kind of discussion where there are peers talking, then it's possible to expect somebody to interrupt. But it's something which is more formal. Perhaps you don't interrupt the other person. You wait
Yeah.
until they have said what they want to say
Yeah.
before you bring your point
Yeah.
to light.
But
No,
it-
and very often I think it would help if we remembered that if I want to interrupt, one of the first things I can do, as you pointed out, body language is important. If I'm sitting back like this, one of the first things I can do is
Yes, to
lean
indicate
forward.
that you want to say something,
or put a finger up. Then the others know
that you have something
that you
to
have something to say. It's just like how you bid for turn in a class.
yeah, but this
How do
does-
you ask your teacher that you want to ask a question? You don't start asking the question immediately. You simply put up a finger or a hand,
Yeah.
and if it's a good teacher, the teacher will
Yes.
make eye contact with you and tell you.
If I may say something, in a meeting this is possible, you know, you can show your hand and the chairperson will. In a group discussion, the leader emerges from the discussion. There
Yes.
is no leader.
That's right.
And some people have the habit of going on and on. So you need to interrupt.
Quite right.
Yeah. So so you need to know how
Yeah,
to.
yeah, but then that implies that in a group discussion, you actually have to be a lot more forceful about
yes.
interrupting. You may have
That's
to say,
what I meant
excuse
when I
me, I
said-
want to say something.
Yes, that's what I meant when I said that it depends on what you are doing. If it is
Yeah.
a group discussion,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
reference for a group discussion
Are
will be
very
very
different.
different. Can we now wind up, because I think we are running short of time. Thank you, Kishore, for telling us about viewers about the differences between spoken text and written text. We started with that, and we have been supplementing whatever we have in the course material in the unit called Nature of Spoken Communication, Context and Text. Geeta, you spoke about different roles that people play, the kind of context there are the person who talking has a purpose behind speaking, behind the communication, and how we relate that, the purpose, to the person, and the kind of relationships that exist between people when they are talking, the turns they take, etc. You spoke about that. And Kishore, I think you came back again to speaking about variations in meaning, that in different languages, particularly the socio-cultural meanings that certain types of expressions take, which makes it very difficult for a person who is from another language to adopt or to take up that stance immediately, or to speak as fluently as the other speaker.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being here with me today and for
Thank
telling our students about this. I know that we have tried to do what we could not do through the course materials, which were printed materials. We've tried to replicate what would happen in a spoken communication so that they can in fact find the material is supplemented through this discussion. Thank you once again.
Thank you.